What's in a name, besides like letters and possibly numbers if you live in a dystopian future where everybody is just a clone? There could also be hyphens, I guess. Naming your characters is one of the most important decisions that you'll make as a writer. It's usually the first thing that you need to fill out on that character information sheet thing. At first glance, this might seem like not that important of a decision, but character names can have some devastating ripple effects through an entire story when chosen poorly. In the case of long names, they can make your story more laborious to write. When combined with the names of other characters, a certain character name might create confusion, and a poorly selected name can also pull readers out of an otherwise well-crafted historical or cultural setting. So let's talk about some of the things that go into selecting a good character name and some of the things that you should avoid. Character names can be divided into roughly two categories. You have real-world names, and you have speculative names, which usually happen in like sci-fi or fantasy settings. When it comes to speculative names, there's obviously a huge range of possibilities because you're ultimately just making up words. You can get as obsessive with this as you want. You can go into different dialects and regional variations and conlangs, make up meanings behind the names, add in trends or allusions to gods or whatever else you want to do. If you're writing in a sci-fi or fantasy world, this is a great way to add a lot of depth to the names, the world, and the characters. But just remember that you're creating a lot of work for yourself if you want there to be a meaning behind every single made-up name. This means that every single character you give a name to needs all this background information created for their name. When it comes to speculative names, I would avoid long, indecipherable, hard to pronounce nonsense that will just distract from your story. I think in general, a light touch on made up words in a sci-fi or fantasy setting is generally a good idea. If your story is going to contain real world names, one thing that you have to consider is the historical and cultural fit of a given name. Sure, in 2025, there are a lot of people naming their kids Genesis and Riker, but if your novel is set in like, I don't know, 1860s Pennsylvania, then those names probably aren't that common. Honestly, it's so easy to look up historical name trends and old census data records and stuff that there is no excuse for having a name that is incongruent with the historical or cultural context of your story. Having characters named in a way that fits the time and setting of your novel is something that contributes to making that time and setting feel real. Don't overlook this. This does not mean that you can't have a character who has an unusual name that's kind of out of place given the setting, but there should be either characters who take notice of that or some kind of explanation for why they're named that way. Also consider that in addition to a first name, a character will potentially have a middle and a last name, unless they're from a culture where last and middle names aren't a thing, which is something that you should research. The same sort of cultural and temporal fit applies to last names and middle names, obviously. If your character's ancestors were from, I don't know, Romania, then you would expect them to have a name that fits that origin. Sometimes first names and last names are related. Stanley Yelnats is named Stanley because Yelnats is Stanley spelled backwards. Characters can also have nicknames. I'm a really big fan of nicknames. I don't know why. I think they're really great for conveying subtle details about the character. They can show relationships between different characters, and they also let you characterize the character who's giving out the nicknames or the character who has a nickname. Holes has some really great examples of this because all the characters have nicknames. X-Ray can't actually see. Armpit presumably smells bad. Magnet is a kleptomaniac. Zigzag has frizzy hair that needs conditioner. Barf Bag eats a lot of Tums. Zero, by all appearances, has nothing going on inside his head. Although his last name is also Zeroni. Oh, sorry, spoilers. And Mr. Sir is named Mr. Sir because his real name is Marion, which I never realized was a man's name. Anyway, a well-thought-out nickname can really round out a character, but it brings up an important issue related to character names, which is how you are going to refer to that character and how the other characters in the story are going to refer to that character. If a character has a first name, a last name, a middle name, and also a nickname, you need to make sure that the reader associates all of those names with the same character. This can get tricky if you have different characters referring to that character by different names of that character. Suppose you have a character named Tommy Leonetti, who with that name pretty much has to be from New York City. Let's say his nickname is Lefty because he's got a wicked left hook. His friends might call him Lefty. Maybe his little sister Dorothy calls him Tommy. Maybe his boxing coach calls him Leonetti. Maybe his algebra teacher calls him Ricky because he always gets Tommy confused with his older brother who's doing a nickel up in Sing Sing because he got mixed up in some stuff. They should have known that he was dirty. Nobody makes $100,000 a year driving a cement truck. If we have POVs from those different characters and those POVs all reference Tommy or Leonetti or Lefty, they all might be referring to him by different names. That's a potential source for reader confusion and something that you need to straighten out. Confusion can also arise when you have characters who have similar names. If Tommy's brother is named Terry, that might be too much and readers might confuse those two characters. And if his father is Tommy Sr., then that's a whole other problem. You need to consider when you're naming a character, not just that character name, but that name in the context of all of the other characters in your story. If a bunch of characters have similar names, it's going to potentially cause confusion for the reader. Also consider that not every character needs a name. Sometimes a character is just known by a title, like the Warden in the Holes universe or the Cat on your favorite YouTube channel. Sometimes the name of a character is just never introduced. The protagonist from the novel Rebecca, who incidentally is not named Rebecca, never gets named in the story. This is a very common issue if you're writing in first-person perspective because getting the reader to know the name of the protagonist when they're always referred to by the pronoun I can be a little bit difficult. Now, having a character whose name is never revealed gives the character a little bit of cachet. It can become irritating. Some readers won't like knowing what a character is called. You also run the risk of needing other characters to have something to refer to the character by, because saying, "Hey, you" with the face gets old quite quickly. But there is some dramatic value you can get by having a character's name not be known, so it's something you should also consider. Speaking of considering things, I considered writing a conclusion for this video, but then I thought, So there you have it. If you've got any thoughts about character names, I'd love to hear them in the comments down below. Make sure you sign the comment with your name so I know who posted the comment. If you want to see more stuff like this, you can check out all my other writing advice related videos and subscribe to my channel. As always, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next time.